Another thing is that I took the base gasket out of this, and you can hear that we have some interference there. Measure the gasket, it's 18 thousandths. I like to have 20 thousandths squish clearance. Without the gasket, it's hitting. The gasket's 18. So squish is less than 18. How much less? Bolt pattern on here is pretty square. On the cylinder, bolt pattern. Assuming that the crank and everything would be in the center, everything would be centered, right? I can put this up on top dead center. And I can find that because if I push down on the cylinder, and I get it right at top dead center, it doesn't rotate. It'll stay there. Because the crank and everything's perfectly in line and it won't roll. The cylinder rocks back and forth, right? On the piston. When I'm at top dead center, I don't have any other interference with the cylinder. If I take it off top dead center, it stays put. Back up, find top dead center. I can push on the cylinder and the crank doesn't turn. I take a feeler gauge and measure. I'm holding the cylinder back so I can measure the clearance between the case and the cylinder on the front side. Okay? I can get an 18 thousandths feeler gauge in there. Just starts in there. If I divide that in half, it's 9 thousandths. If I put 9 thousandths underneath the front and the back, it should just click on that piston, should just click on the cylinder. And I'm going to assume that, okay? Because we don't need to be perfect about this, but just to get a basic idea. 18 thousandths gasket, 9 thousandths of interference. This saw came in here with 9 thousandths squish clearance. That's pretty darn tight, guys. Tell me if that's wrong. But I believe that that is correct. Within, what, a couple thousandths, I would assume. So, anything less than 15 would be, in my mind, pushing the limits. Especially on a saw of this size, and this one only had 9 right out of my receiving this saw. So just kind of wanted to go over that. I could put the gasket back in, I could put my solder in there, and I could roll it over and I could try to measure my solder. But in my experience, if I'm tighter than say 15 or something, my solder's 30, squeezing it in half. If I'm less than 15 thousandths squish clearance, then the solder starts to give a false reading. So by doing it this way, I think I can be more accurate and assume with what I've done that it only had 9 thousandths, thereabouts, of squish clearance. Pretty tight. Just wanted to go over that. So I noticed something on the cylinder. Up in the top of the cylinder. So I put a gasket on it. I bolted it back in. Threw my solder in there. And it doesn't touch the solder anywhere except right on the very tip. Right on the very, very tip of the solder. Right? I want to set you guys up here. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. So it has over 30 squish clearance on the majority of the squish band. Right? With the gasket. You know, maybe we'll do one more thing here. Well, it's senseless to try because I can't take it out, but take the gasket back off. Over 30 in squish. Right? Throw the solder in there. We've got over 30,000 squish clearance. My solder's 31. Doesn't touch it except right at the very edge. Can't roll the motor over. Right? You'd say, how can that be? 18,000 gasket. We had over 30,000 squish. We checked it with the solder. We measured the gasket. Should turn over, right? But it won't. I'm going to see if I can measure how thick that little band is in there. I was able to force it over center pretty tight. Still doesn't touch the solder. I'll try to show you what I'm talking about. I've talked about this in the past. There's a ridge left right here in the corner. The piston's hitting that ridge. But there's over 30,000 clearance in this area. Over 30. But here, this ridge is over 30 thousandths tall. Won't allow the engine to turn over because it's hitting right on this very edge of the piston. This is a flaw from the manufacturer, that they didn't bore this deep enough to get that ridge out of there. So we'll be correcting that. Understand? Alright. I'm going to turn the base. I have to modify my mandrel just a little bit. Short cylinder. I don't quite have enough clearance down here. Guys ask me quite often why I delete the gasket on saws. It's because of the thickness of the base. On all these older saws, it's thin. Before I cut it, it was just over 250, 260. I had one at 270 thousandths thick, and that's pretty thin base. I would rather leave the 18 thousandths of metal on the base and remove the gasket. Leaves the cylinder stronger. That's the idea of that. That's why I do it. So, moving on. I'm gonna clean up our base here for chamfer, the chamfering done. I don't know if I said it or not, but it is a 52 millimeter, so it is a Magnum. I haven't found anything else other than the switch wire that indicates that anything is aftermarket. It's all been aftermarket OEM parts. Other than the switch wire. Something else to notice going through the cylinder, you notice that little rub mark on the intake side of the piston. The floor of this cylinder is very crooked. It's not flat, it's on an angle from one side to the other. I don't know if you can see that or not. You compare it to the base. And there's no chamfer. There's literally no chamfer to mount to anything on any of the parts in this thing. It's just like nothing. Even the exhaust port has very, very little on it. The exhaust port is not symmetrical. It's got humps and bumps, more on the lower part of it than the upper part of it, but it's not symmetrical. It's not even same shape from one side to the other. Lumps and bumps in there. You can really see it in the window on the exhaust port. But yeah, literally no chamfer in there at all. Somebody else has been here. Like they tried to clean up a little casting flash or something there before they put it together. They only did it on one side. I believe it's a KS cylinder. Everybody praises them. To me, it's just another cylinder. But, I think I'm going to have some clearance issues on the side. Believe on the clutch side's going to be kind of tight. And I'll have to take a little shave off of the outer part of the cylinder over the transfers to give a little more clearance there. And that's where we're going to be going next. And as suspected, it's tight right here, right in that area. I pretty much took care of it. Sometimes it doesn't take very much. It's just a little clearance. Hitting the crankcase there. Holding it up, you know. Don't want to force things together, right? So I think I got that taken care of, and we got to move on to cut that lip out of there. See what we end up with for squish once that lip's out of there.